I'm going to be a warrior today. I'm going to be brutally honest and tell you a story about myself that is both near and dear to my heart because I learned a lot from it, but it's also very difficult to relate because it was a very painful episode in my life. Then I'm going to tell you some brutally honest things about you. But since I went first, you're going to have to be okay with that because I'm smiling when I do this. Turnabout is fair play. When His Holiness Pena Rinpoche, who is my root guru and the supreme head of the Peiyu lineage, came to America, came to this temple particularly to confer the blessing of the Rinchen Terzat. He stayed here for 4 months, was it? 4 months. And during this time, my other root guru, Gyaltsen Rinpoche, who was also there, put a bug in my ear and suggested that I ask His Holiness to go to the Vietnam War Memorial and to pray for those soldiers who had died, or those people who had died in the war. Gyaltsen Rinpoche, as a way to tell you this story, he's been in America quite a long time, and he's come to really understand America and Americans, and he really loves us, has a great respect for us, and he's actually really studied American history, and he knows something about it, and he watches the news every night, and he's become interested in us as a people and as a nation. And he has a great deal of compassion for our particular brand of Americana suffering, which we are so proud of. And in his great love and regard for Americans, he made the suggestion to me, and I really took it to heart because I was there, and I had friends that died in the Vietnam War, and I marched against the Vietnam War, and I was very much involved with the entire process. I remember seeing the demonstrations and seeing the demonstrators hurt and have their heads bashed in, and so, no one lives through that period at just the right age without being deeply affected by it, and I was very much affected by that war. And so, when that happened, that Gyaltsen Rinpoche suggested I asked Pena Rinpoche to do this, I thought, yes, this is great. Yes, I have friends that died there, special friends of mine, and and I really feel for all the death that happened at that time, and that is a crucial time in American history, and yeah, I feel connected to this, and this will be, to me, like a celebration, like a real connection, a real coming home, a real event. That something that was an event that I lived through that was so near and dear to my heart, that affected me so much, that really shaped many elements of my personality, that somehow it would come to an end by His Holiness, praying for them, and he's my root guru, and what an amazing circle of events. Wouldn't that be meaningful? Well, yes, she is a sucker for meaning. Anyway, I went to Pena Rinpoche, and I said, Pena Rinpoche, I did 3 prostrations, all the traditional things, did 3 prostrations, gave him a white scarf, said to him, would you please do this? I didn't tell him that this was a request from Gyaltsen Rinpoche, because if I had told him that, the whole thing would have come out differently. But I just told him from my heart that I asked him, would he please come and pray at the War Memorial and do a puja there for the people who had died in order to eradicate their suffering and blah, 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 and this is very important to Americans, very important to me. And I went on and on and on in my extraordinarily eloquent manner. Yes. Everybody's looking at me like, really? I'm so surprised. And I just really asked him from my heart, would he please attend to this, and take care of this as my root guru? I would be so proud. It would seem so meaningful to me. And he looked at me, and his eyes got narrower and narrower and narrower, and the little pulse at the side of his head started to pulse, and I thought, oh God, I'm in for it now. Now, I have to tell you, Pena Rinpoche is known to be a very wrathful Lama. He's not angry in an ordinary sense, but he's wrathful in an enlightened sense. And when he's wrathful, it really changes your life. I mean, it's not like when an ordinary person gets mad at you. It's like sitting in front of the Memorex commercial, you know. It blows you away. And it changes you. And that is precisely what happened to me at that very moment. My entire life was changed. He said to me, "How do you dare," now this is the painful part, "call yourself a bodhisattva? How do you dare single out one period of time and one nation's problems? How do you dare call yourself a representative of the Dharma?" And I went, it was a lot of them that died, not just one. And he said, "Think about cyclic existence. Think about of this universe, there are 3,000 myriads of universes. Think about this planet. Of this planet, in all the galaxies, how many planets are there? Think about the sentient beings. Think about the countries of the world." And he proceeded to tell me a story in which, as the Chinese were forcing the Tibetans out of Tibet and were taking over Tibet, that he had to leave Tibet in a hurry and climb over mountains and take with him thousands of people, most of whom died. And although he left Tibet with thousands of people, he came to India with something like 20 or just a handful of them, that they all died en route, in trying to escape. And he told this story that as they were dying, his own people, his own students who were completely dependent on him, as they were dying with their bodies, cut open with bullets, as he was running, they said to him, "Please, Rinpoche, come back and do poa for us. Give us the prayers for death." And he had to step over them to run. And the reason why he had to run was because he held in him empowerments and transmissions that only he had. And if he were to take the chance of dying himself and not confer those transmissions, they would be lost to the world. And so many uncountable sentient beings would not be able to receive the benefit of that teaching. And he described that crying and sobbing, he had to abandon his own students. Of course, I know that simply by calling out to him, they were liberated. I know that from my heart. And I know that his power is such that all he has to do is think of them, and they are liberated. Yet he was not able to give them any comfort. He didn't truly abandon them. He was only not able to give them the comfort that they deserved at the time of their death. And he said, "I had to make that sacrifice. How is it that you are aligning yourself with the idea of being an American to the point that you think only of this war and not of all the other wars that have happened during the time that Earth has been? And of that, why is it you've forgotten the other realms of cyclic existence? How is it you have forgotten the lower realms? How is it you've forgotten all of the other people and all of the other kinds of sentient beings that there are?" And as he was blasting me, I could hear myself, quite frankly, defending myself in my mind. And I was saying, but I haven't really forgotten them. I really do practice for all sentient beings. I really do. My whole life is about that. I really have made the vow and do intend to keep the vow, to return again and again and again under any conditions until there aren't any sentient beings left to liberate. Why is he blasting me like this? And then I looked at my own mind further and I saw, he's right. He's right. I did have a special affinity for that time. I do have a special affinity for this country. I do have a special affinity for my students. I have a special affinity for my friends. I have a special affinity for my family and my loved ones. And he's right, that under those conditions, I guess I'm not much of a bodhisattva. It may be that my intention is such to come back and return for all sentient beings, but I'm not really practicing equanimity. I'm not really seeing the equality of all that lives. And actually, and here's the part where I get to tell the story about you, that's true of all of us. isn't it? We think of our special life form as being so extraordinary. And our family, we would die for our family easily. Does that mean that we're compassionate? No, it means that we're attached to them. Actually, I was thinking about something else that happened. In fact, it happened last night. It made me think that maybe I should talk about this today. I went to check on my daughter while she was sleeping. And when I went to check on her, I noticed that crawling on her pillow next to her, now this is going to sound gross, but this is the country, there was a tick. You know, a tick. And I remember looking at my sweet little baby, you know, and looking at this horrible bug and thinking, get away from my baby, you nasty bug. I mean, not in those words, of course, but I did pick up the bug and think that it was probably one of the most miserable life forms that it would even consider taking a hunk of my lovely child. And then I realized I was doing it again. Because the Buddha teaches us that all sentient beings have been our kind mothers. And that means that all life forms are equal and that we ourselves can be born as any life form according to the karma of our mind, according to the fabric of our mind. There are many stories in Buddhist teaching that say that, you know, you can really favor your family and really love your family, and then they can be reborn as a dog that you kick in the next lifetime. There are many stories like that in Buddhist teaching to try to teach us of the equality of all that lives. And I was thinking about that little tick. You know, I like to think that I'll be able to help my daughter practice Dharma and liberate her mind to the extent that she will not be born as a tick in the next life. I like to think that's possible. But let's say it's not possible. Let's say, and it's theoretically possible, that she would take the form of a tick in the next life. And let's say in the next life, I'm not so fortunate as to meet up with that tick before I met up again with Dharma. And let's say the tick was then my daughter. And let's say I picked up my daughter and squished her for biting the tick. You know, we have to think like that. We think to ourselves, oh no, that's silly. I'm so great now, I would never be reborn as a tick. Well, you know, you have to think again. And the Buddha teaches us that we're not all that great. The Buddha teaches us that the karma that causes the rebirth as an animal is the karma of ignorance and not understanding and dullness and slothfulness. And we all have it. And the karma that causes us to be reborn as in the hungry ghost realm is the karma of grasping, greed, and desire. And we all have that. The karma that causes us to be reborn as in a hell realm or a hellish realm, a lower realm, is the karma of anger. And we all have that too. So we don't really, in our short-sightedness, get the big picture. Instead, we remain very attached to those that are close to us. And the reason why we actually remained attached to them is because we define ourselves through our relationship with others. And the bottom line of that attachment is the belief in self-nature as being inherently real. Not the awakening to the primordial wisdom state, which is our true nature. The Buddha teaches us that in the assumption of self-nature, we must always segregate self from other, and we must always define other and react toward other. Therefore, there will always be beings in our lives by whom we are repelled, toward whom we have great respect. There will always be beings in our lives that we have very little care for, very little consideration for, and then there will also be those in our lives that we have high regard for and would do anything for. And we always have special interests. Some of us really want to align ourselves with the Tibetan situation and take care of the Tibetan situation and try to help Tibetans. And some of us really want to align ourselves with the plight of the Native American Indians. Some of us really want to, practice the holding to civil rights and try to benefit the minority groups in America. Some of us are animal lovers. Some of us love children. Some of us prefer sophisticated, educated people to ignorant, poor ones, or vice versa. But whatever it isn't really about compassion. It isn't really about giving all that you have with the understanding that all sentient beings suffer too much, and with the understanding that they are equal, that they are absolutely equal. It's really about defining me. In defining me, and liking and not liking, and being close to and being repelled by, in viewing things in different ways, and having a cause, and having meaning, and having a rap, and having a discourse, something that you can relate to, we actually define ourselves. Particularly so in our relationships with our families. In our relationships with our families, we pull around ourselves a tight, comfortable little circle of love. Or if not love, at least interaction. Perhaps strong and sometimes either passionate or anger-filled interaction. And that interaction defines us. It tells us something about our struggle. It tells us something about our passions. It tells us something about the way we feel. It lets us know who we are. Reminds us constantly. Our family become a constant mirroring of where we're at. And we're comforted by that because we can always look at ourselves that way. And in looking at ourselves, we can remember that we live and therefore not panic. It's all about survival, and it's all about clinging to self as being inherently real. True compassion really is based on understanding the equality of all that lives. And His Holiness Pen Rinpoche was absolutely correct. I was making a big deal about those things that were meaningful to me. Did those that suffered in the war and died in the war suffer more than any of the other sentient beings who have been incarnated so many times that we have all experienced war? Are they suffering any more than the ones that are alive now that we know about, that are hungry? Or the animals that are imprisoned or victimized by their own stupidity and dullness, or slaughtered for food? Do they suffer any more? Did they suffer any more than anyone else? And in our particular relationships with our families, with our friends, the things that we go through, and we're always going through some kind of thing. You know, you wouldn't even remember that you had a family if you weren't going through a thing with them. You know, it's just, the touch point is about me. And, you know, I think sometimes as I watch people organize their lives with their friends and families, that maybe we're afraid we'd fly off in a million pieces if we didn't have to be home by noon to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Or didn't have to support our family in some way, or take into account how they feel, or think of what's happening there, or just organize ourselves in some particular way. Or with our friendships and our romantic relationships, our ordinary friendships. It's really like that. It's almost that we fear we would come apart at the seams if we didn't continually define ourselves through looking outward at those things that reflect us. The real problem is that we delude ourselves into believing that we are practicing Dharma, or that we are really deeply compassionate people. And for the most part, it's a crock, basically. Because we are not so much giving of ourselves as we are taking. If we become very interested in special interest situations, are very dedicated to the welfare of our family, it actually has a profound effect on us in that it influences us to think in a certain way about ourselves. We think, oh, I'm a good mother, now I know. Or, oh, I'm a bad mother, now I know. Or, oh, I'm a good friend. Or, oh, I'm a very concerned individual. Or, I'm socially competent. Or, I'm socially concerned. I'm aware of the world. I'm into nature. I'm an animal lover. We have all of these ways of understanding ourselves. And it's about patting ourselves on the back and thinking highly of ourselves. Or the flip side of that, which is to think so much about ourselves that we punish ourselves constantly for not doing well, but we still accomplish the goal of thinking about ourselves always. Instead, the Buddha instructs us that all sentient beings are equal, absolutely equal, and that each of us contains the potential for enlightenment in the form of the innate Buddha nature, the Buddha seed that only awaits our awareness. The Buddha nature, the Buddha seed within us, is the absolute assurance that at some point we will achieve Buddhahood. We are the Buddha, therefore, but we have not awakened to it yet. And that's true of all sentient beings without exception. The non-physical ones, the physical ones, the form and formless, the animals, the people, any form that you can possibly imagine, that can possibly exist, has within it the inherent Buddha nature. It is impossible for a sentient being to exist without that inherent nature. And they will all become Buddha someday. Even that tick. Even that tick. Well, in all fairness to myself, I want you to know that I did give the tick a blessing, and I did put it out nicely and tenderly on a leaf, but not without becoming extremely angry at it for messing with my daughter. So there's probably a mixed karma there. Probably come back as a student that I have a real tough time with. I always worry about that. But at any rate, we have to think that way. We have to think about all sentient beings being completely equal. We have to practice that way without attachment. It has to mean nothing to us, and that's the point. That's when it becomes genuine compassion. When it's our family, it means a lot to us. We really want them to do well, because it's a reflection of us. So it's no big deal if we really do a lot for them. But if we love that one that we've never seen so much that we vow to return for them endlessly, under any conditions, to scoop them out of the suffering of cyclic existence and bring them to enlightenment firmly. If we vow to return, no matter what the condition might be, for those that we have never seen and never learned to love, that's a truer kind of compassion. Furthermore, if we practice in a determined and forceful and disciplined way in order to achieve realization for all sentient beings, most especially for those that we have never seen, that we know only in theory are suffering, that is the most meaningful kind of compassion. It is true compassion. Now, the kind of compassion that we feel for our family has for us a real drawback as well. And I'm not saying not be compassionate to you. I'm not telling you to be not lacking in compassion toward your family. But I am saying that if you listen to what Pena Rinpoche taught me, he said to me, what kind of bodhisattva are you that you think of only those people that died in the war and not of all people? So if we think of our family with great compassion, the drawback is that we are constantly enforcing our self-image, constantly enforcing our clinging to self. My family. You hear people talk about their families, and you think maybe they forget that their family has a name. Have you ever heard people say, my husband constantly? Or my boyfriend or girlfriend constantly? Or my son, my child? I just said it about my daughter, didn't I? She has a name, you know, Atira. And that's a very difficult thing to watch yourself do. We cling so hard, and it's about us. And that the compassion that we have, the relationship that we have with our friends, even with mutual sangha that we are used to living with, our countrymen, our children, there's a mixed blessing in working only for their sake. In the one sense, yes, you are doing something compassionate, but in the other sense, you are betraying what you are. You are forgetting the point. And the point is that you are not the person you think you are, that you have been for the last, say, 80 years at the outside, depending on how old you are. Instead, you are the Buddha. It seems that I am Ahkon Lhamo. It seems that you are whoever you think yourself to be. But you betray your nature if you cling only to that and think that the relationships that you call your family and your friends and your comrades, that they are it for you. That clinging is the result of our confusion, of our dullness, of our ignorance. We have forgotten our nature and we have no taste of it. But in fact, we are involved in this endless turning of the wheel of cyclic existence. For that very reason, because we cannot awaken to our primordial nature, to the Buddha nature. And we have no view, we have no understanding. We see others revolving endlessly in this wheel with us, and all we do is react toward them. We don't get the big picture, we don't see the wheel of suffering. We don't see that in fact they too are the Buddha, and that they too cannot awaken, as if from a bad dream. Furthermore, we cannot see the faults of cyclic existence. We cannot see that due to this, cyclic existence is filled with suffering. The suffering of impermanence, the suffering of loss, the suffering of suffering. And we seem unable to do anything about it, because instead we cling to self-nature and try to prove it, and try to save it, and try to hold on to it, and try to survive. Forgetting that there is nothing of us that requires survival, that the nature is undefiled and indestructible and unceasing. We try to survive. So, this interesting phenomena is just that. It's a very interesting phenomena. And if we examine ourselves, we can really do a lot better. Can really do a lot better. We can try to develop a sense of equanimity. We can try to develop an awareness of the equality, the true equality of all that lives. Of all that lives. Even those of us, interestingly, that are animal lovers, how strange. We want to save a beautiful creature like a deer, or a dog, or a cat. But we don't care much for little spiders and ticks, do we? Cockroaches, worms, leeches, tapeworms, roundworms. You see what I mean? But you'd love a little deer, wouldn't you? Bambi. So we're like that. We're really like that. Our goal then as practitioners is to develop a sense of the equality of all that lives. And the only way that we can do this is through thinking. Don't wait. Please, don't wait till the time when you love tapeworms as much as deers. Please don't wait for that. Because it will never happen, naturally. You have to meditate on this. You have to really think about this. You have to study and understand that the tapeworm is the same as the deer, is the same as your child, is the same as you. The difference is the karma of their mind stream. I have a really funny line about the tapeworm, but I don't think I better say it on tape. Anyway, I'll let that go. But those of you that would remind me, I have a great line for this later. It'd be an awful thing to put on tape, though, wouldn't it? The difference between all life forms is that they actually have only a difference in their mind stream, in the karma of their mind stream. Those of us that have a great deal of hatred will be reborn in a certain way. Those of us that have a great deal of ignorance will be reborn in another way. Those of us that have a great deal of greed or grasping will be reborn in another way. And the combinations are infinite, and so are the life forms. So are the lives. So please think about this. Please think about developing true and stable compassion. The other drawback with the kind of compassion that we feel towards our friends and families is that it is not stable. It is completely dependent on how they act. You may have great compassion for your family, but if they cross you, forget it. You have great compassion for your husband or wife, but wait till they give you a hard time. Out. Forget it. You're a loser today. You're in the doghouse. We have great compassion for our children. And it's the same thing. We love them a little more when they're sleeping. So please think about that. That kind of compassion is not stable. It does not last. When these relationships go at the end of our life, so does that compassion. It doesn't really imprint on our mind streams. It's very little, lightweight. The compassion that remains with us and produces the karma for the next rebirth, fortunate rebirth, is the karma that is based on the equality of all that lives, and the understanding of that, real altruism, real caring for others, real longing to be of genuine benefit to sentient beings, real and sincere wish to see the cessation of suffering for all sentient beings equally. Meditate on the fact that those that are your most dearly beloved could very well be a tick in the next lifetime, a real annoyance to you, or a tapeworm for whom you have to go seek medical care. Think about that. Really, you should think about that. It's not a pleasant thought, I know, but you should think about that. It's good for you, like broccoli. And then think about all of the different ways in which your family and friends appeal to you, and think about the fact that they could very well be very foreign, very alien life forms to you in some future time. And try to develop a sense that any life form that you see, from the most repulsive to the most uplifting, must have been your mother, your kind mother, who was one of the reasons why you got here, and could have been the sweetest lover you ever had, or the most adorable child, and love them that much, sight unseen, enough to return for them again and again and again, under any circumstances, until their suffering is finished. Please meditate in that way. That is truly the Mahayana ideal, and truly the method that purifies the mind stream and brings one closer to enlightenment. Let alone the fact that it makes you happier, makes your mind more stable. You're not up and down worrying about what your family and friends are doing. You just kind of love everybody. And it causes you to be generally a happier person. So think about these things, and please practice. Remember, if you just think about it and don't practice it, it doesn't do you much good. So really try to practice it. Some of the things that we have people do is to buy up all the live fish bait in the local stores. Every now and then, down at Poolesville store, somebody in red robes comes down and buys up all the local fish bait. They must wonder, what do they do with these things? You know, hundreds of fish. Well, what we do with them is we let them go. We bless them and let them go. And we do that with night crawlers and earthworms. If any of you are fishermen and you go to the bait store and there aren't any more night crawlers left, tough. Tough noogies. because we're just going to keep on doing it. And go to fish markets and buy up the animals and take them away from the fish market so they don't recatch them, set them loose. And understand that you're not doing anything other than taking care of your family. You are taking care of the great family of cyclic existence. And we are all completely and intimately interrelated. In that way, you will never be disappointed. Loving only those that are close to you will always disappoint you, because in cyclic existence, sentient beings are bound to let you down, because they are sentient beings. You'll always be disappointed. Certainly it's been my experience. I always have been. So rather than be disappointed, love completely, openly, with no regard for the response to yourself, simply because you've meditated on the equality of all that lives and you know it to be the truth. And in that way the mind becomes stable and the joy becomes all-pervasive, rather than just limited to having a good day with your friends and family. Please do think like that. Thank you very much for being here today.